Okay, we're going to look at a treble stitch now. That's UK terminology, or a double stitch US terminology. And this video is going to build on the ones we've made so far. So I do urge you to go back if you haven't already and look at the videos we've made for all the stitches working into the chain, because each of them, you know, as we move along, there's less explanation about different sections of how to do it. So if you're not sure about, for example, putting your hook through the chain, you need to go back and have a little look at the double crochet UK terminology or single crochet US terminology to have a little look about how that's going to work. So for this video, for this stitch, we're starting in the same way as we have for the previous one, which is to say we put our yarn around our hook. It's a taller stitch, so we're starting with yarn around the hook. And we're going to start with this one in the 4th chain from the hook. That means we leave 3 chains unworked and we work into the 4th one. So let's just count that. Obviously ignore the one that's going over the loop that's going over the hook. Ignore that altogether. Here's chain number 1, ignore that. Chain number 2, ignore that. Chain number 3, ignore that. And we're working into chain number 4 here. So I'm going to put my hook through the chain in exactly the same way as we've done on the other 2 stitches we've seen. I'm going to put my yarn around the hook and pull it through. And I have got 3 loops on the hook here. Yarn around the hook again, and this time pull through just 2 of those. And leave 2 loops on the hook again, yarn over one last time and pull through both of those loops, and that creates our first stitch. However, we left 3 unworked chains at the very beginning to get our hook to the height that it needs to be to create these tall stitches. And most patterns, because it's quite a lot of stuff happening here, most patterns will ask you to treat that, those beginning chains, will ask you to treat that as a stitch. And we talked about this at some length in the previous video when we made the half treble stitch, or the half double stitch of your US terminology. We talked about why that is at some length. So again, you can go back and look at that. But we're going to count this beginning part here with these chains as our stitch. So we've sort of made a true stitch here, but if we're counting, we've effectively got 2 stitches now. All right, so keep that in your head because that is important when we get to the other end. So let's go through again how we make that stitch. Yarn around the hook, and the hook is going to go into the next chain, just consistently, however you're choosing to do that. Pick up the yarn or yarn around the hook again, pull through 3 loops on the hook, yarn around the hook, through 2 loops, yarn around the hook, pull through 2. And that is how you're creating that taller stitch, which is called a treble crochet in the UK, or a double crochet if you're in the US. And I'm going to make these all the way along. Yarn round, through the chain, pick up the yarn and pull through, pick up and pull through 2, up and pull through 2. And that is how we're making this. And you will be able to see very clearly that it is a taller, much more, it gives it a taller post. I'm going to work it all the way to the end. Okay, penultimate stitch there. And this one is going to go into that very last chain, which is the one with the slip knot, which is always the trickiest one. Okie dokie, let's have a look. It's curled like a quaver, and you will know what they are if you're in the UK. It's a sort of a crisp. Right, here we go. So there's our first row of treble crochet, and you can see very clearly it's a taller stitch. You can see the posts are really well defined, easy to see, and it makes these easier to count, I think, actually. But let's go ahead and make a second row, because we're going to turn our work, and just like I did on the previous video, I'm just going to pop my darning needle through that last stitch that I made, just as a marker for myself and to explain to you where to put your hook. So we know we've got to do 3 chain well, we don't know, I'm telling you now. When you when you're making this stitch, your turning chain is 3 chains tall. It is 3 chains tall, all right? And it needs to be that tall so that it matches the height of the rest of the stitches. Okay, if you are finding that it is much taller than your stitches, you can leave one out, but let's not complicate things for now. This is things that will happen as you kind of grow in confidence with your crochet. By the book, if we're going by the book, when you make a turning chain for a treble stitch, that's UK terminology, or double stitch US terminology, you need to make those 3 chain at the beginning. Now, I already said to you that generally those chains will be treated as a stitch. And what that means is I've put my darning needle through that last stitch that we just made on the previous round. If I go ahead and put another stitch in there, I will end up having too many. I will increase my stitch count, and I do not want that. So I'm going to skip that one. Normally I'd put my hook, if I was sort of working every single stitch, I'd put my hook in there, but I'm not doing that because this is our pretend stitch. We've already made it coming out of here. We don't want another one in there, so I'm avoiding that altogether. And I'm going to make my first stitch coming back the other way into the next stitch along, and that is in there. All right, so if you need to mark your last stitch of each row, totally fine. Totally fine. And until you're sort of confident with where everything sits and what it all looks like, it's probably a good idea, because if you are working a straight blanket, your biggest niggle when you first start out is going to be that your edges, you're going to think your edges don't look right, and that is generally down to sort of placing stitches in the wrong place to begin with or end with. So feel free to mark them with a safety pin. That's a great thing to use because you can easily take them out, or an open stitch marker of some kind, or poke your needle through it like I did. That's not ideal because it does fall out. So I'm making these stitches in every stitch all the way along, and I want to just show you how we treat the end stitch. Okay, so all the way along in the normal way, nice and easy. And what is so lovely about this stitch is that it grows your work very quickly, because it's a lovely tall stitch. Grows your work very, very quickly. Now, if you download the little stitch technique sheet that Jane has written, you'll see there's a 4th one that we've not covered on the videos there. So you can go and have a little look at that. It's very similar. You'll be easily able to do it, but we're not going to cover that on here because it's a very tall stitch. Right, so I've just put my last stitch in the last available V. All right, but you can see here very clearly that turning chain, those 3 chains that we used to get our hook up to height. And what we need to do, we know that these chains have to count as stitches, don't we? We've established that they have to count as stitches, which means I have to put a stitch in the top of them. So all I'll do in the same way is I will get my hook and yarn ready. So that means I've got my yarn around my hook, and I'll just put the hook through the 3rd of those unused chains and make my stitch. That's all it is. So do not be concerned about that. You've worked your stitches into chains. It's nothing that you can't do. So here we go. We've now got 2 rows of UK treble or US double, and you will see at each end, let me just get my pointy darning needle. This end here, here's our turning chains. That's going to count as our first treble. You can see it's tall, it matches the height of the stitches, so it kind of, you'd have to look really closely to sort of realize that was just a chain. So that's pretending to be a stitch, and it's working really well. We've made our real quote unquote stitches coming all the way across, all the way to the end, and that last stitch is made into those turning chains from the very beginning. And what you will see, I know it's curving and it would uncurve it will become straighter as you work it, but what you will see is that those edges are sort of straight, which means the stitch count is going to stay the same, and you're going to achieve nice straight edges as you work backwards and forwards on whatever you're working on. In this, pretend it's a blanket, whatever. So to check your stitch count, then you need to know how to count these stitches. I'm actually going to go straight into that before we look at the anatomy. Why not? And all you're going to do, because these are lovely, tall, really easy to sort of define, you can just count the posts. So I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stitches. Okay, I'm going to do the underneath one, and I really hope there's 14 there. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right. Gosh, so relieved. So that's how you count them. They're really easy to see, aren't they? So let's go extreme close up and look at the anatomy. Okay, as before, our top row here, I'll just take my hook out. Our top row we're looking at from the right side or the front side of the work. And let's have a look at one of these stitches, shall we? Okay, so we've got the V, our beloved V, sitting right at the bottom of the stitch here, here, here and here. Can you see? Oh gosh, I can't manoeuvre my needle. Here and here. Okay, there's our V. And then about halfway up, you've got a wrap of yarn here. Can you see coming round here? And you've got then an almost vertical piece and your vertical V sat on the top. So little V at the bottom. About halfway up, you've got this wrap of yarn. Then you've got a second piece just underneath the vertical, which sits at the top. So that sort of lovely smooth twist is how you would identify it from the right side of the work. And if you look at underneath here, you'll see the wrong side looks a lot more bobbly. It looks more vertical. So you've kind of got your V, but it's, well, it's not V, it's sort of vertical, 2 uprights, 1 and 2. And then you've got another sort of 2 uprights or a twist up here. And then your vertical across the top. So it's much more kind of vertical looking, bobbly from the back. So front side is like a smooth, lovely twist. Back side is a bit, or wrong side is a bit bobbly and vertical. Okay, so that is the UK treble crochet or the US double crochet.